Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. This is my second video today, and we're going to follow Marius Hosting's excellent guide on getting a Plex container going on a Synology NAS that's capable of hardware acceleration. He has multiple guides, so watch my earlier video to show all this or show all that. This will be a slightly longer guide, and it will be using Portainer to install Plex, and that's necessary in order to pass on the information in the container to enable hardware acceleration. We will also need to find our Synology user ID and GID group number. But let's start with the main guide, and Marius is an excellent resource for you. When you get your container going, or maybe even before, head over to a site, throw them a donation, because you'll be back to figure out how to install other containers. It's one of two great resources. Space Rex on YouTube, Will and his channel is an excellent resource for Synology in general, and Marius has it all covered for Docker containers. And some people are purists, say you shouldn't install things like Marius does with a scheduled task because you don't learn enough about a container that way, but I highly disagree. I think this is the best method to get your feet wet, and this is actually a Portainer install, which doesn't have much to do with a scheduled task. So let's just run through his steps. Like I said, make the donation. You need to have Portainer installed. I'm going to omit doing the Plex claim code because I don't want to show my Plex claim code, and you can claim the server manually. So follow this step, it'll make things a little easier, and I'll point out where I'm excluding that later on in the video. Step 4 is, well, it really doesn't mention it, I don't think, but you need to have Container Manager already installed. And that's simple. Go into DSM, go to Package Center, click Search, type out container, search for it, click on Container Manager, install it, and make sure it's running. The next step is to create your Docker structure. Under DSM 6, you had to manually create the shared Docker folder. I don't think that's needed anymore under DSM 7. I think it creates itself, but just in case it doesn't, that's easy to do manually too. Control panel, shared folder, create shared folder, and call it Docker lowercase. So you do need to create a Plex folder, and this can be named anything you want, but I would suggest starting a scratch pad and I've already got my configuration that I need for the container I'm going to build generally. I'm going to call mine Plex HW, which in this guide, let me see if this is the right guide I want. Nope, I have messed up. This is the guide that doesn't have hardware acceleration. So let's find that right guide. You just skim through here. All right, so yeah, we're going to be using Portainer And this is the important information we need in the configuration. All right, so again, step one, support is work. Definitely do that. You have to get Portainer installed. I'm going to omit the Plex claim code section, and you have to create your containers for both Plex and Portainer in DSM. So we'll use Plex HW just like I put on my scratch pad, just like Marius is doing, and of course Portainer. So you head back to DSM, you go into File Station, you go to your Docker shared folder and create new folder, and you do one for Portainer and you do one for Plex HW, which I need to do that one for a new container. So this is the container I just spun up for my previous video without hardware acceleration. This is my existing test Plex install on this older NAS. Portainer is already running, and this is the new one we'll be using, which has nothing in it. And if you're not sure the structure, with a Linux install, it's always going to be a library folder, application support, Plex media server. So if I wanted to move this whole container to an unraid setup, I'm just copying and pasting that to where it needs to be and redefining the container parameters to spin the same container back up without losing anything, which is the best reason to run Docker containers. All right, so we got the directory structure set. Now we need to really skip to Portainer and get that going. So again, support is work. This is going to be installed with a container manager, scheduled task. So container manager is already installed. The Portainer folder is already created. And now we create a scheduled task. And basically, he lays it all out. You'll need this info. So copy that. And the only thing that's important is that this matches the folder you created under your Docker shared folder. We're going to reach Portainer at its normal port number. So basically, you make your screens on your Synology NAS match this 3-panel setup. So you go to Control Panel, you go to Scheduled Task, and you'll see I already have installed Portainer because I've done this in the past. So I'm going to edit it, and you'll see that my first tab matches everything in this first tab. I've called it Install Portainer. It's a root user. And on the initial screen, you uncheck Enable, which I did. Under Scheduled, everything matches this. Run on the following date, do not repeat. And under task settings, I'm going to email myself the information of whether the container started up properly. And then I just pasted in everything that is here. If you only want to know if the container fails to run, you can check this. So when you click OK, you do have to type your admin password. So now it's just a matter of right-clicking on it and choosing Run and waiting for the email. So let me just get a few things prepped while we're waiting for that to come in. And Marius shows you just put this in your web browser window to access Portainer. Now you'll need to already know what your internal IP address is. So it's really just a copy and paste of that, and that will access Portainer once it's spun up. So if I go back to DSM into Container Manager, you'll see that I already have, let's make this full screen. Portainer is spun up, and let me check my email. So I've got an error that the container name Portainer is already in use, but I know it worked because I ran it the first time, and I didn't want to kill my container. So basically, you just log into it in a web browser, and I've got mine already open in a Chrome app someplace. Let me take this off screen. Okay, so it opened up without me having to type a password because I already had it open in a Chrome app. So this is the Portainer interface, and if I go in and click the icon for Docker, I can see I have 3 containers and only the Portainer one is running. My test Plex install that already existed is exited, and the tutorial video I just made for Plex without hardware acceleration, that container is exited too. So let's let me do this. Let me find my actual Chrome app and bring that alongside. Oh, sorry. I need DSM back. Before we can go any further, we need to go find the UID and GID numbers for our NAS. Most likely it's going to be the same as what Marius has in his examples. So I won't really go through this, besides I'll just show it myself. So again, control panel, scheduled task. I already have this set up. And unlike Portainer, this one has to run under your admin account. And I've created a temporary admin account to show for this video and the last one. So if I edit that, these 3 screens are going to match what Marius shows on these 3 screens. It's really quite simple. So I'm going to get email notification of that running or failing to run. This is set up just like Marius says, and send it to your email address, and the only thing you type here is just ID. So now if I run this, we'll wait for that email to pop in. And actually, you don't have to wait. This was at the bottom of the email message that is going to come. It shows my UID and my GID as 1028-100, just as they are in the instructions for getting this going under Portainer. All right, so now I just received that email, and this is what it'll show, just like it did previously. So we're done with Portainer. We can go back to how to install Plex. So you start Portainer. Actually, I'm not done with Portainer. Sorry, this is a little disjointed. So you do have other instructions to follow with Portainer. And unfortunately, I can't run through these because I have an existing Portainer install. So just make sure you follow all those steps. So now with Portainer open, you can copy and paste this info into a temporary document, and I'm going to do it above mine. Oh. Okay, so he's naming his container capital PLEXHW, and I am naming mine just Plex HW. Everything with mine is going to be the same as his, except for this line here. And of course, my PUID and PGI number matches his, so that'll be the same. And I am omitting this Plex claim line, and I'll just claim the server manually so I don't expose my own Plex claim code. So this is about the only thing that might be confusing. And let me bring in my own NAS structure to this. Let me do it like that. So you might be confused on what to do with your TV shows and your music media because Marius is only referencing movies. And this is a slightly different example from the other instructions I just went through. He's got movies as a shared folder, and then there's a subfolder of media in it. Where I have a shared folder, let me back onto the Docker shared folder. I have a shared folder called Media PD, and that's what I want to point to. I don't want to point to what's inside it. Otherwise, I'd have to add extra path lines for each of these individual sort folders for the different library types, and I don't want to do that. So if you see in my example, I'm pointing to my shared folder, and then this is an alias. This is what it'll look like inside Plex. So let me exaggerate this by calling that my Plex media look here. And Marius also gives an example of making that a read-only access where I'm making it read-write. And you want it to be read-write if you're ever going to add a DVR to your Plex install. Otherwise, you won't be able to record, and you won't remember this later on. You'll pull your hair out trying to figure out why your DVR won't work. So if you're never going to add a DVR, that can be read-only. And actually, access to my container configuration files can be read-only, just like his example. So the path is pretty easy to figure out for your own setup. Hopefully, you've got all your Plex media in one shared folder. So it would be volume 1, that shared folder name, colon, and then the rest of it will be just what it's going to appear to be inside Plex. So hopefully that makes things clear, and that's the only little part of his instructions that are confusing. The path. This is the alias. That's what it will look like in Plex when you add a library. This is your actual physical structure on your NAS. A lot of people, this might just be media, and you don't need the rest. It could be Plex Media. It could be My Media. You just want to make sure it's all lowercase when you set up the folder structure and there's no spaces involved. You don't actually get to spaces in uppercase until you're into your actual Plex structure. So the proper names for my movies all have uppercase and spaces in it, as do the actual movie files. So you need to know your time zone, and that's at least for me in New York State, that's a Google search. That's all I did. Copy that. And that is replacing his statement. Where are we? That's replacing his time zone statement with my own time zone under the environment. And of course, I have my own numbers here too that we've already talked about. So that's about it. That's the only changes you have to make. You have to make sure that this matches the name of the actual container folder you created in the Docker container. And you have to make sure this statement matches your physical media, and this is just what it's going to look like inside Plex, which, again, I'm exaggerating for this example. So I'm just going to copy all of this. And we'll go back to his official instructions. You're going to go into Portainer. Let's see where we're at with his instructions. So his instructions want you to go to a stack. So I can do it just here. And I can, let's see, I need this bigger. So I don't create a stack every day. So I'm going to add a stack, and I'm going to call it Plex with HW. Click into the web editor. Well, it's actually already selected. So down here, I'm just going to paste my information. And I guess I'm just going to deploy the stack. All right, I'm missing something. All right, let me figure this out and I'll get right back. Trying to think and speak at the same time. So I've got this error here. No spaces and no uppercase letters. So now I'm going to click deploy the stack. So it was marked successful. And now if I go to containers, you'll see that this new container has started up. Now I know what my IP address is. 192.168.68.116. Portainer's running on port 900. So I know to access this server that I need my NAS's IP address plugged into this formula. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to wait until this doesn't say starting anymore, until it says started. So I'm going to pause the video, go refill my iced tea, and come back and start back up. I'm back after a long pause. My new container started up as unhealthy instead of being marked healthy. And I made one mistake in the instructions. So, you will see an unhealthy container. Click into this, click stop. Again, I'm not a YouTube pro. It shows container successfully stopped, and if I make a mistake, you'll learn how to fix it. And my mistake was in the stack. So click stack, click the stack we created, click editor, and I made the mistake of making this read only, and it started up with an unhealthy container. That has to be read right. Your access to your volume could be read only if you're not going to add a DVR. But the access to the config has to be read write. So now all I have to do with that fix is update the stack, repull the image, click update. And if I go back to container, well, let's see. If I go back to container, it'll start back up. And this time, I'll come back after a pause and we'll have a healthy container running. Okay, it didn't take too long. You can refresh occasionally or it will just turn healthy. So at this point, we are done with Portainer. Again, you need to know the address of your server, the IP address of your NAS. And Marius does show how to access it, which is just this same formula. So let's bring in my cheat sheet. This is the address to the new server I just spun up. So in a fresh web browser, I'll paste that in. And let me just take this off screen for a second. I pinned into my Plex install. And this is a new server. Now, if you use the claim part of Marius's instructions, you'll just get here quickly. So now you name the server. And what am I going to call it? Let's call this one DS 1019 plus HW for hardware acceleration. So now we get to the Add Library screen. Do not click Next here. Let's add some libraries. So I'm going to add the main movie library. And again, remember my nested folder structure is sort libraries for every library type. So I want to go into that and then into my main one to then add those movies. So I'll leave this just as movies. Browse for media. And here's my exaggerated alias. My Plex Media look here. Click that. I'll see my sort libraries. Permissions are already granted because of our PGUID number and the other number. So I'll enter that sort library. I'll enter the main library and I'll stop when I see my movies. I'll click Add. I leave everything default except for one thing. I go down and I use 2 as my minimum collection size to have them created automatically. And I would caution everyone not to check this. If you check that and your movies and episodes are embedded with the release group's name, you might not match properly. You might see that embedded metadata instead of matching to the online databases properly. So never check this unless you're running a specialized server. So let's not add all of them. Let's add the kids library. Next, browse for media, my alias, my sort folder from movie libraries, my kids folder. Same advanced settings for the minimum collection size. Now we'll add a TV show library. I'll call that just TV shows. Get into the right sort library, the right library folder. And under the advanced option, depending where you name your media from, you might want to change this. If you name from the movie database, leave this alone. If you name all your TV media from the TV database, change that. Let's add another kids library for TV shows. My alias, my sort folder, and the actual kids TV show folder. I'll change the episode ordering to TVDB. And let's add a music library as the last thing we'll do. So now I'm into my music sort folder, even though there's only the one music library. And there's really nothing to change under the advanced settings. I'll click next, and Plex tells you to get some client apps. All right, so let's go into the settings. You'll see we're already detecting credits for movies. And if I go into transcoder, use hardware acceleration is already checked. It may not be for you. And then you can see your transcoder down here. This older Synology NAS has the HD graphics 500 iGPU, and I can actually select that besides auto and hit save changes. So now if I go to manage libraries, I can see the libraries I added, and you'll see the medias here. So let's do this. Let's go to dashboard. And let me pull up my HTPC client app. Get that logged in. Okay, so we're showing some libraries that are unavailable, but that's from my old server that I had running on this NAS, which here's these new libraries. So again, this is all public domain media, so I really can't get in trouble with a YouTube strike, but I'm going to just take this to the side and we'll use the first movie. Now this is all keyboard driven. So let me just pause it there and we'll look at dashboard. You'll see that we're direct playing it. So I'll go over and manually put it into transcode down to 4 megabits per second. And sorry it's so loud. I'm waiting for it to pick up on the server that it's a transcoded stream, which really should have been immediately. All right, so what I neglected to do is for this server, I neglected to check automatically sign in and save changes. Let's take this down to an extreme transcode. Okay, so now we picked it up. You'll see the HW symbol here, and the 1080p is being transcoded down to 720p. Now Plex will remember this. If I ever come back to this movie, it's going to start up in the same transcoded state. Oh, it didn't. Sorry, it used to remember. Oh, it did. It popped up. So you got to remember to take a movie out of the transcoded state if you're testing with it. So let's try another one. And I believe I have multiple versions of some of these. So I'm going to pick the larger one. And before we get too noisy, let's transcode that too. Okay, so you'll see we're into the transcoded state. It's down to 4 megabits per second. And if I take it out of transcoded, it's pretty responsive. So this is an older Synology NAS. The 2020 models will have the UHD Graphics 600 chipset in it. And hopefully this can get you through the only tough spot of a Marius Hosting install, which again is really just understanding where to point to for your Plex media. And again, don't make the mistake, don't change this to RO. So, I'm not a pro YouTuber. Thanks for watching, and if you have any trouble, contact me through YouTube or a private message, and not through the Facebook group I'm posting this in. Thanks for watching.